Hello, welcome to The Drum. I'm John Barron. Coming in Melbourne tonight, Executive Director of the Sir Zelman Cowen Centre at Victoria University, Nidal Nayoon. Hi, Nidal.
Hi, it's good to be back.
Great to have you there. First tonight, as debate continues over the wording of the referendum question on a voice to Parliament, former Prime Minister Tony Abbott today savaged the entire process, speaking this afternoon at the final hearing of the Parliamentary Committee into the referendum. The prominent Conservative said the voice, whether it succeeds or fails, will leave Australians embittered and divided.
I think that this voice is wrong in principle, and I think it's potentially quite dangerous in practice. I think it's wrong to divide our country on the basis of ancestry. I think it's a mistake to give about 4% of the population more of a say over how our government and our parliament works than everyone else. I don't think anyone should have a special voice. I think everyone should have the same voice. And the voice of all of us is the national parliament.
In response to the former Prime Minister's concerns, lawyer and activist Noel Pearson said that the voice would do nothing but bolster the democratic process.
The provision is not going to create a separate democracy. You are the democracy. Our Senate and House of Representatives is our democracy. What the voice does is improve it by giving a voice to the most marginal community in the country.
James Blackwell, it was really interesting to see Tony Abbott and Noel Pearson appearing on the same stage on the same afternoon today, given that a decade ago they were working pretty closely together in what at the time seemed like a reasonably unlikely alliance. That's certainly broken down now. When we've got Tony Abbott saying this is divisive, whoever wins, and Noel Pearson saying no, it's not, it's simply democratic. Which side do you fall on, divisive v democratic?
Entirely democratic. The voice is designed to improve the way our country functions and to improve our democratic processes. For too long, Indigenous peoples in this country have been excluded from our political system, deliberately, often, for many centuries. And this voice is about both recognising us as First Peoples in this country and recognising that continued sovereignty and connection to this continent, but also going, you know, what's working or what's going on now isn't working. The policy process is failed. We need something better. Our communities over several years have had process after process where we've continually reaffirmed our desire for a voice in the Constitution to speak to government, to speak to ministers, to speak to Parliament. That's what our communities have asked for years. And that is this process. And lawyers have continued to say, constitutional experts have continued to say how important this wording is, how effective this wording is, how good this wording is. The only thing divisive is Tony Abbott's continued divisiveness, not the voice proposal.
Father Frank Brennan, many see him as being somebody with, you know, a strong moral compass, high ethical values. When somebody of his standing in the community says, you know, if you just limit the voice to the politicians and not the public servants, we maybe create a simpler, cleaner, tidier model that at least some Conservatives can get on board. And as Julian Leeser has suggested when he's made similar suggestions, that could make the difference between winning and losing. Just getting maybe a third of the Conservatives that are currently in that 35% who are saying right now, I'm a no.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's a few things to say to that. The first is Father Brennan and Greg Craven, who are both at the committee today, have said that they're going to vote yes regardless of whether the changes go ahead or not. So it's kind of a bit disingenuous for them to be then kind of leading with this no, almost a no case, where they're still going to be voting yes. I think the second thing is, if we do change the wording to limit the proposal, then we're not really listening to Indigenous Australians. We've continually said in our communities from the regional dialogues back in 2015, that was 8 years ago, to now that we need a voice to Parliament and the Executive. There's been a continued call from our communities, from our leaders, from our elders and knowledge holders, from our young people, that we need these two things, the Executive and the Parliament. So if we are to limit it, then we're not really doing the job that we say we're going to be doing, which is listening to First Nations people. If we are to have a voice, we have to have a voice in the process too. And our voice has been fairly consistent. You know, 83% of First Nations people in a poll this last week have said that they support a voice to the Parliament and the Executive. If we're not going to listen to that, what's the point of this whole exercise?
Sally Branson, I wonder, the whole question over Tony Abbott and whether he should appear or not. There was claims from him and from the opposition minority members on this panel that he was being gagged. He'd made a written submission, but he was wanting to appear in person. Labor sort of said, no, we're not going to hear from Tony in person. They reneged at the last minute and they said, yeah, we're going to let him appear. What did you make of all of that? Did Tony Abbott, given that he's a pretty long time out of office right now, is he relevant to any of this? On the question of whether there is room for compromise here, clearly these sort of inquiries are about trying to come up with the best possible wording and trying to get some breadth of buy-in from across the aisle, or at least on the crossbench. Do you see this as a constructive process? Are we getting anywhere beyond what the government just wants to put on the table?
No, man, part of the reason, I'm sorry, I can't hear very well, but part of the reason I'm smiling is because I'm trying to be as polite as possible, because I find the position...
You don't need to be polite. This is the drum. Say what you like.
Well, I find the whole position about the need for alteration, with due respect to Father Brennan, to not be persuasive based on the reasons that are provided. The first one is the question of the voice administrative impact on, that it will overwhelm decision making. And we know that legal experts have come out, including former judges, as well as constitutional experts, to dismiss some of these concerns and say there's no legal basis, essentially, for arguing that it would have the kind of impact that we're being told that it would. But also, when it comes to the more exaggerated claims about the overwhelming load that might end on administrative effectiveness in Australia, we know that some of those exaggerated commentary have been described by legal experts as silly to have words for, And so that part goes out. And some of the people that is already mentioned, the moderate liberals, already support the current version of the voice. So I think the real question isn't necessarily whether we need compromise, it's the degree of compromise that we need. And I think that the degree of compromise that is being demanded by the Conservative on this notion is not a compromise, it's getting us to a point of conceding, simply. Because let's remember that this is a group of people, especially including Tony Abbott and the Liberal Party and the Conservative, that had 10 years of political opportunity as well as the political authority to give Australia the kind of the voice that they thought would be proper. They had it. They didn't do anything about it for 10 years. Now, these people all of a sudden want to tell us that there's no sufficient details, that this has just been sprung out on them. It's as I said, to be polite, ridiculous. And it's one of the reasons why I find it tremendously frustrating, because I think it is so deep in a lack of good faith argument. That a group of people that not only had the political power and the political opportunity to give us the version of the voice that they want, not only did they neglect that opportunity, they've also historically been involved with Indigenous people in crafting exactly the kind of proposal we now have. There had been other proposals before that they deemed were too extreme. And indeed, the current version we have is developed with the support of some of the moderate that now take issues with certain provisions of the voice. It is totally unfair to continuously ask Indigenous people to compromise themselves in order to settle the fears of a group of people that don't seem to want to be settled at all. And so even for me, as a person who is not an Indigenous person, I wonder how frustrating it must be to constantly be put up with this almost BS level of discussion on something that is tremendously important. Now, let me be a bit more polite. Now, I do think that there are Conservatives that have real issues with the voice, right? But come on, guys, you had 10 years. You didn't do anything.
Yeah.
It was taken to an election by the Labour Party. They won. It is now time for the Conservative to stop acting like a wrecking ball and give this country an opportunity to have a self-image that doesn't include fear as the core character of it.